Hi, welcome back to another episode here on Creepy with Coffee. I'm Kim, your storyteller. So today's story, imagine buying a second-hand car, thinking it was just an old rusty vehicle, but what if it carried something far worse? This is a story of a Kancil, a small car that sat abandoned for 4 years before it found a new owner. Well, things had been happening since then. Somehow the past refused to be buried. Well, like usual, before we start with our story, for those who have yet to do so, please help me like this channel. Now, let's get on to the story.
This is Creepy with Coffee.
Earlier this year, or maybe late last year, my husband bought a second-hand Kancil. So for those who do not know what Kancil looks like, it is actually our Malaysian, I would consider one of the pioneer local cars. So I'm going to include a photo so that you know what a Kancil looks like, right? So when I say second-hand, I meant it in the worst way possible. The car had been sitting abandoned for 4 years, practically a relic left to rot. But my husband insisted he wanted to help a friend, obviously the friend who sold the car, who needed money. So we took it in. He spent weeks repairing it, sending it to different workshops, trying to bring it back to life. Since it was a manual transmission, well, younger listeners, not all cars are auto, yeah? Only my husband, my son, and I could drive it. My eldest daughter, Kak Long, refused. She hated how heavy and stiff the steering wheel was. For a few months, I used the Kancil to send my son to school. It was only a short distance, less than 200 meters from our house. But the school had strict safety rules. I'm sure a lot of schools have this. Parents had to drop off and pick up their kids, and walking or cycling alone wasn't allowed. Then one night, that is when everything changed. My son had a fever, so after Maghrib, my husband and I took him to the clinic. It was a routine visit, nothing unusual. The clinic was about 30-40 minutes away from our house, and by the time we got back, it was already dark. As my husband pulled into our driveway, I noticed something, or someone. There was a man standing behind the Kancil. So when we went out, we actually used a different car. So the Kancil was at home. At first, I thought he was a visitor, maybe a neighbor or someone waiting for us. So I lowered my gaze for a moment to fix my hijab while my husband parked our car next to the Kancil. As we pulled in closer and we parked, the man was now standing between the two cars, our Nissan and the Kancil. That is when I realized my husband and kids weren't saying a single word about the guest outside. Normally, if someone was waiting for us at our gate, my husband would ask, "Who's that? Has somebody had a friend over? What is he doing here?" But he didn't. My kids didn't react either. I hesitated before asking, "Bang, who's that?" My husband frowned. "Who?" That is when my stomach dropped. I turned my head to look, and the man was still standing there. A man late 30s, dressed in tattered, blood-stained clothes. His face was slashed and bleeding, his expression one of sheer agony. He wasn't just standing there. He was staring at me, pleading without words. I obviously gasped and Astaghfirullahalazim. It had been years since I'd seen one of them. My husband and kids turned to me, "And why did you say that? What's wrong?" Well, that is when I realized I'm the only person who could see the man. I didn't answer. My son was sick and I didn't want to make things worse. I lowered my gaze without looking at the man anymore and walked into the house, pretending nothing had happened. But that was just the beginning. A few months later, my son had his own horrifying encounter. One evening, just after Maghrib, he screamed and ran into the house. His body was trembling and his face was pale. Well, he said he had seen the woman, or rather, Cik Pon, standing right next to the Kancil. Days before that, I also experienced something that still chills me to this day. That day was noontime. It was during noontime. The sun was blazing and I was heading back home after dropping off my younger son. As I walked past the Kancil, I saw my daughter, Kak Long, sitting inside the Kancil. That time when I saw her, she had the window rolled up and wasn't moving. I knocked on the glass, obviously, and called out, "Kak, why are you sitting inside the car? It's hot, get out, or else you'll faint inside there." She didn't roll down the window. Instead, she just nodded and motioned me to go inside. So you imagine this. You were coming back home, you saw the car, and this is when you see your daughter sitting inside the car. And when you talk to her, I sighed and I thought to myself, teenagers. I shook my head and went in, grumbling about how ridiculous it was to sit in a hot car in the middle of the day. I figured probably she was just using her phone, boyfriend or something like that. As I walked into the house, I decided to grab something from her room. Well, her room was the coldest in the house. It had aircon and was close to the kitchen, and also I often spend my time there. But when I opened the door, that is when I realized Kak Long was sleeping on her bed. I shook her shoulder roughly and said, "Kak, when did you come in?" She groggily sat up and said, "Huh? What do you mean?" "I just woke up. I've been sleeping since noon." My heart pounded and said, "But I just saw you outside sitting in the Kancil." She looked at me confused and said, "Ma, I haven't left my room since." A cold chill ran down my spine. Well, who or what was in the car? Well, that was the last time ever I drove the Kancil. A few weeks later, the car just stopped working. It refused to start. Maybe it was a mechanical failure, or maybe it was something else. Well, I don't care anymore. I just left it rot. Well, some second-hand cars come with scratches, dents, or broken parts, while others comes with something much, much worse. That is all the story that we have for this episode. Well, if you have your own haunted experience, well, either it's a car or something else, my email is in the caption down below. Once again, for those who have yet to do so, please help me like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Until the next one, I'm Kim, and this is Creepy with Coffee.